All right, let's see. 12:01. As soon as it turns 12:02, we're going to get started. And it just did. So, again, I'm so happy to see you here today. My name is Linda. Linda Adams. I work with the Staff and Faculty Health and Wellbeing program on campus. And we try to do nutrition seminars along with stress resilience seminars. We have our diabetes prevention program. We have some physical activity types of programming. Our website is wellbeing at ucdavis.edu or .ucdavis.edu if you want to take a look at everything we have. So, like I said, this is being recorded for your information. It's a webinar, so you can ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat box, whichever. I'll be monitoring both of those and asking some questions of our speaker, AlAnoud, as we go on with the information. So I think that's the only housekeeping we have to do. So right now I'm going to go ahead and introduce AlAnoud, who will tell you about herself and talk to us about how food affects your mood. Thank you so much, AlAnoud, for coming today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So my name is AlAnoud Dabbas, and I'm a fourth-year student, and I'm majoring in clinical nutrition and minoring in psychology, hence my interest in this subject. And that is why I kind of wanted to touch upon both areas of interest of mine and see how they actually link together. So without further ado, I'm going to start my presentation on how food affects your mood. So this is going to be how the presentation goes about. First, I'm going to introduce why we need food, the science behind eating, nutrients that improve your mood, neuroplasticity, inflammation, and finally, how we have a gut-brain relationship. So a little background on the subject. So over the last couple of years, our health has been challenged in so many different ways, and our society is now overworked, overstressed, and overwhelmed and overstimulated by the different demands of our daily lives. And our eating habits have been all over the place, and especially after COVID. We also sometimes tend to sleep too little and discount our bodies from what it truly needs to survive. Not only has this taken a toll on our physical well-being, but it has also affected our mental health as well. So over time, as you can imagine, this is going to lead to a depletion of energy stores and feelings of hopelessness and worry. And we already know that the field of psychiatry has gained great insights into biological factors that may lead to mood changes and increased anxiety levels. However, recent and emerging scientific data is also showing us that one of the most underutilized yet powerful tools could be found at the end of our fork. So basically, what we choose to eat or drink affects our overall well-being, both physically and mentally. Food can affect your mental health in several ways, so it's important to know how the food we eat and the mood we experience are related. And I'd like to say that throughout this presentation, I'm going to try to dismiss the labeling of good and bad foods that have been attached to foods throughout the years, because I feel this has created a stigma around certain foods, and it has created negative relationships between people and certain foods. And I personally feel that when food is eaten in moderation and in a balanced way, it's okay. And so that's why I'm going to try and steer away from that type of labeling. So why do we need food? So food provides our body with the necessary materials for it to enable it to grow, replace damaged parts, and to function normally. So basically, food is very vital to our lives. And food basically provides us with nutrients, and it's usually divided into two subgroups, macronutrients and micronutrients. So macronutrients have carbs, proteins, and fats. Carbs are the body's primary fuel, and they provide energy for muscles and the central nervous system. As for proteins, they provide structure and are involved in metabolic, hormonal, and enzymatic systems and help maintain the acid-base balance in our bodies. Finally, fats tend to act as energy reserves when we don't have enough carbs in our system. They're also good insulators, protect organs, and aid in absorption. As for micronutrients, they consist of vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are very important for the energy production, immune function, and blood clotting, while minerals play an important role in growth, bone health, fluid balance, and several other processes. So the science of eating and how eating could affect our mental health. So our brain is a very expensive machine to run, and it requires a lot of energy. Despite the brain weighing about only 3 pounds of our total body weight, it actually consumes around 20% of the calories we eat each day. So its optimal functioning has been found to be linked to a number of key nutrients, both macronutrients and micronutrients. And as stated previously, many of us suffer from mental health issues or mood disorders, and depression and anxiety are namely two main ones that we suffer from. So we usually hear about the terms depression and anxiety in our daily lives, where people are like, I'm so depressed, I'm so anxious about this exam, I'm sad, I'm stressed. But what actually are they in like clinical terms? So depression, clinically speaking, is defined as a person with multiple symptoms, which may include a depressed mood, low energy levels, diminished ability to concentrate, changes in appetite, a decreased interest in pleasure and things they used to find pleasure in, and daily life activities that they used to enjoy. And this usually occurs for longer than a 2-week period of time. In other words, people usually describe it as life losing color or vibrance. As for anxiety, it is usually categorized or characterized as excessive anxiety or worry with symptoms such as irritability, fatigue, and sleep troubles. And you would usually experience these symptoms more days than not over a 6-month period of time. And although I'm aware that there are treatments for both depression and anxiety, such as medications and therapy, sometimes they don't help as much as they should. So more than 10 years ago, the National Institute of Mental Health published a landmark study called the Sequence Treatment Alternatives to Relieve Depression. And this study looked at the efficacy of several antidepressants, including selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, and it also looked into cognitive behavioral therapy. And this study showed that 2/3 of participants didn't find relief after being prescribed antidepressant medications, and most needed to try several different ones in order to actually see a change. So while I'm aware that medications do help millions of people around the world, and so do therapy sessions, they tend to offer an incomplete remission from the symptoms and could lead to other side effects as well, such as fatigue and drowsiness and irritation. So this is why I think we need to take a more complementary approach on how we view our mental health. And for example, we should also look into food. So I'm going to address the top nutrients that help beat mood fluctuations, depression, and anxiety. And I will also address how these nutrients affect different parts of our body and our brain. So, and I'll get into these more in detail as the presentation goes along. So our brain health, like the rest of our brain, like the rest of our body, continues to change and grow as we go along. So neuroplasticity is one reason consuming brain healthy foods is very important. Food also greatly influences bodily inflammation, and studies show that persistent and chronic inflammation could lead to depression and anxiety issues. There have been strong links and correlations between inflammation and the changes of mood. So by eating anti-inflammatory foods, we actually could help reduce the risk of mental health issues. Other work and new research has been showing that the microbiome also plays a big role in brain health. The brain and the gut are in constant communication with each other, and the so-called good bacteria that live symbiotically in our gut could actually influence how our brain functions. So today, America's foodscape is currently built on prepackaged items, and nearly 60% of what we consume daily could fall under the processed category. This processed category includes refined foods, added sugars, and preservatives. And I understand, due to the fast-paced lifestyle we have and the rush of our daily lives, prepackaged foods and items could be more to our convenience, but they are not as beneficial to our health. So I don't know why this is the first time that it struck me, but the other day when I was walking at Trader Joe's and I was walking through the frozen section aisle, it was kind of crazy for me to think that the frozen section aisle has boxes of foods with literally every like fats, proteins, and carbs in them, which you just stick in a microwave and it's already ready-made. And we usually only tend to look at mainly the macronutrients in there, but we never actually look at the micronutrients, which are actually very important for both your body and your brain. So according to the USDA as well, the vast majority of Americans are actually not reaching their RDA for key nutrients. So a third, or about 33% of people, lack zinc, 67 to 68% of people are deficient in magnesium, and 75% of people are not getting enough folate. So as you can imagine, our brains can't function at their best if they lack the nutrients they need to flourish and work properly. So here's where the intersection of food and your brain health comes in. We all know that the Mediterranean diet is very good for our health and especially our heart health because it includes fresh veggies, fresh fruits, seafood, whole grains, nuts, and olive oil. But recent research has found that the Mediterranean diet is also linked to a decrease in incidence in dementia and depression and actually influences our mental health as well. So I'd like to introduce some studies to look at with regards to how the Mediterranean diet and the Mediterranean lifestyle influences your mental health. So this is an epidemiological study called the Navara Study that was conducted in the Spain University of Navara. And researchers followed 10,094 former university students, none of whom reported experiencing depression or taking antidepressants at the start of the study. And they did so in order to investigate the role of diet in later development of a depressive disorder. And so at the start of the study, researchers gave each participant a questionnaire in order to assess what kinds of foods they ate on a regular basis. They also surveyed 136 questions in order to help researchers better characterize and categorize each person's dietary pattern and the foods they consumed in frequency that are similar to those in a Mediterranean lifestyle. Next, a dietitian analyzed the results and assigned each person a Mediterranean diet adherence score. So basically what this means, the more Mediterranean foods you ate, the higher your adherence score would be. And results showed that participants with the highest adherence scores and the ones that ate more Mediterranean foods were much less likely to develop depression over nearly a 4.5-year period of time. They actually had a 42% reduced risk of experiencing depression. However, a more Western diet was actually associated with a higher risk of mood disorders. So moving on to our next study, it was conducted at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where psychiatrists conducted a lifestyle study and intervention with older adults previously diagnosed with depression. And these interventions basically shared general nutritional guidelines. They also reviewed food intake and helped participants create meal plans and grocery lists for about a 6 to 8 week period of time. They met on average for 8 hours over 3 months. And the results showed that there was a 40 to 50% improvement in their depressive symptoms over the course of the study. And these improvements actually lasted for 2 years, which signifies that this isn't a short-term solution, but rather it could help you in the long term as well. And now moving on to one of the final studies I'm going to talk about now, SMILES. And this is one of the most important studies that I will touch upon today. So this study was conducted in 2017, where researchers from Australia's Mood and Food Center at the Deakin University School of Medicine published the first ever randomized controlled clinical trial of a dietary intervention for adults with major depressive disorders. The name of it was SMILES, which basically stands for Supporting the Modification of Lifestyle in Lowered Emotional States. This study was led by Felice Jacka and Michael Burke, in which they recruited around 176 participants who have already been receiving treatments in the form of either medication or therapy. They were then divided into 2 groups. So half of them were randomly assigned to a dietary intervention that involved 7 individual nutrition counseling sessions with a certified dietitian, in which they talked about the Mediterranean diet, and the nutritionist would help them adopt a modified version of the plan and of the Mediterranean lifestyle. The other half of the participants, however, were considered to be the control group, and they were called the befriending protocol, where the interventionists spent the same amount of time with them. However, instead of talking about diets and the Mediterranean lifestyle, they just hung out with them and spent the same amount of time visiting the participants. And a baseline measure of the depressive symptoms were measured at the start of the study, 3 months later, and then 6 months later as well. And individuals in the dietary group had a remission rate of 33%. So basically, in other words, a third of the people who received dietary intervention completely remitted from depression. And according to Jacka, who is one of the leads of the study, she saw that there was a tight association between the degree to which participants changed their diets and the degree to which their depressive moods improved. And this conclusion was reached because nearly all other factors of this study were controlled. The study also showed that there were improvements in the level of anxiety symptoms compared to the other group as well. So now I'm going to start to introduce a number of nutrients and micronutrients that actually affect your mental health and your mood as well. So to start off with folate, or vitamin B9. So folate regulates DNA, and it's a major neurotransmitter and major neurotransmitters that are strongly linked to depression, such as serotonin and dopamine. It also helps regulate mood, the ability to experience pleasure, and the ability to think clearly. And low levels of folate have actually been associated with low mood, low energy, and feelings of worry. And a third of depressed patients are actually deficient in folate. And a lack of it leads also to inflammation because it helps break down homocysteine. So folate is involved in the breakdown of homocysteine and the conversion of it into methionine. And so when homocysteine builds up, this could lead to inflammation and in turn affects your mood. However, folate is found in a number of different foods, including leafy greens, chickpeas, lentils, Brussels sprouts, chicken liver, and more. Our next micronutrient is iron. So beyond helping the brain get the oxygen it needs to function through the hemoglobin that travels from that transports the oxygen from the lungs to the brain, it also plays an important role in the development and management of depression and anxiety. It's needed for the production of two key neurotransmitters responsible for regulating mood, similar to that of folate, which are dopamine and serotonin. And low levels of iron have been linked to brain fog, less energy levels, and a poor mood. And if you actually increase your intake of vitamin C, it helps increase the absorption of non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is basically iron that is found in plant-based items and not meats. So foods that include iron are actually beans, dried fruits, meats, and leafy greens as well. Moving on to omega-3 fatty acids. So they're one of the longest and most complex fats that we could eat. They actually stimulate our brain to produce important nerve growth factors that promote neuroplasticity and the ability for the brain to grow and function and change and flourish. It also tends to reduce inflammation as well. And there are actually two types of omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. There's the shorter, less complex ones, which are the alpha-linolenic acid or APA, and there are the more complex ones, which are EPA and DHA. The more complex ones have been found to actually be linked more to treating depression and anxiety and improving your mood. EPA tends to promote brain health function and lowers concentration of pro-inflammatory molecules in the brain. DHA also plays a role in anti-inflammatory functions and is important for building blocks for most hormones, and some of them are the neuroprotectants and the resolvins. They're also found in foods such as seafood, as you can see here, salmon, and avocado, walnuts, and many leafy greens. Moving on to magnesium. So magnesium is a key ingredient in the body's chemistry. It's required for the proper function of nerve cells and brain cells, and it stimulates brain growth. It is also one of the first ever nutrients to show a link between the micronutrient itself and treating depression as well. And it's also found in a variety of different foods and different food sources, and that of which include leafy greens, beans, and seeds, and different nuts. Moving on to potassium. So potassium actually enables nerve impulses and every neural connection across the human nervous system. A lack of potassium has been also linked to mental fatigue and a decrease in mood. And a study in 2008 actually found that high potassium diets made mostly of plant-based food help alleviate symptoms of depression, as potassium has also been shown to regulate serotonin levels. And so foods to eat in order to gain enough potassium for your mental health and your body itself include leafy greens, bananas, kale, oranges, and there are many other more options as well. As for selenium, so the production of glutathione is an important antioxidant that is found in the brain and that relies on the presence of selenium. Selenium also provides protection and offers protection from oxidative damage. It also produces selenoproteins that are important for metabolism and thyroid health. And finally, it's also needed for the reproduction of DNA and the synthesis of DNA, as well as cell signaling. And foods to look out for in order to eat enough selenium and to give your body enough of this micronutrient include tuna, shrimp, lobster, and Brazilian nuts. Moving on to thiamine or vitamin B12. So as I stated previously, the brain has very high energy demands. And so if you have less than optimal levels of vitamin B1, it links to low energy and irritability and lethargy, because thiamine actually plays a role in the conversion of glucose to energy. And obviously it's not as simple as how it's shown here, but it does play a role in the conversion and converting glucose into energy. And so it's important to consume enough of it. And thiamine is usually found in seafood, leafy greens, pork, and peas as well. Moving on to vitamin A. So vitamin A is a very important vitamin. It works as an antioxidant. It regulates cell growth and cell division as well. It also plays an important role in the production of DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids previously talked about, which is also important for brain health. It is strongly linked to a reduced link of dementia and depression and facilitates neuroplasticity as well. And foods that include vitamin A are meats, eggs, pumpkin, and sweet potatoes as well. Moving on to pyridoxine or vitamin B6. So vitamin B6 is one of the ingredients required to make neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine, both of which have found to play a role in influencing mood. It also helps create melatonin, which regulates the body's clock. And here you can see how this is kind of an indirect effect of food on your mood. So basically, we all know that when we don't get enough sleep, we get irritated and bothered. And so by consuming more pyridoxine or vitamin B6, it actually helps regulate your body's clock, which in turn helps you feel better and puts you in a better mood, I guess. And so it also has been found to decrease homocysteine and in turn decrease inflammation as well. And it's been found that when levels are low, people tend to experience irritability, sadness, and they find trouble concentrating. So don't forget to eat some bananas, chicken, wild salmon, and chickpeas to be able to give your body enough of the pyridoxine vitamin. Now, vitamin B12 is also a very important vitamin to keep an eye out for. So it helps produce vital brain chemicals that regulate the mood and anxiety levels, such as serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, all of which play a role in your mood regulation. It also helps support the myelination of brain cells, which allows the synaptic messages to travel more efficiently in the brain. And unfortunately, 10 to 15% of adults over the age of 60 are actually deficient in B12 in America. And so you should try to eat foods that include vitamin B12, and they usually are animal-based foods such as eggs, seafood, and dairy. So for those who are vegans or vegetarians, they can consume vitamin B12 through fortified grains and fortified cereals. So it's widely available for everyone. Moving on to vitamin C, which is one of my favorite vitamins. It's a very important vitamin because it's an antioxidant that helps counter the damage caused by inflammatory processes in both the brain and the body. It also tends to manage depression and anxiety and lowers anxiety and kind of decreases the symptoms of depression as well. It also, as previously stated, helps in the absorption of non-heme iron. So it's a kind of a situation of a two birds, one stone, where you're eating vitamin C and you're eating folate and you're eating iron, and it helps the absorption of non-heme iron as well. And vitamin C is found in a variety of different foods, such as leafy greens, bell peppers, papaya, oranges, limes, lemons, and the list can honestly go on forever. Moving on to zinc. So zinc is a protective nutrient that helps the body or helps support the body's natural defense system and helps alleviate inflammation. It's involved in the synaptic transmission and neuroplasticity as well. And even though low zinc levels are difficult to measure, they could lead to low key levels of key neurotransmitters such as serotonin and glutamate, and in turn increases the risk of depression and anxiety. So it's better to be safe than sorry and try to eat foods that are high in zinc so that you can not have to worry about how much zinc you have in your body and kind of experience symptoms of depression and stress. So foods that actually include zinc are sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, as well as nuts. Now moving on to one of the last nutrients I'm going to talk about today, which is choline. So this is a very important key player because it's a special molecule that's important in the synthesis of lipids, including the myelin sheath. It also helps reduce inflammation in the body, and it's a key ingredient in important neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, which is important in learning, memory, and emotion. And the Hordland Health Study that was conducted previously recruited 4,632 adults, and results showed that individuals who consumed more choline through eggs are actually less likely to develop anxiety and depression later on. So now, after talking about the several different nutrients that actually help your body and also mainly your mind, I'm going to talk about how these nutrients could affect the neuroplasticity and the growth of your brain. So in the past, it was common wisdom held that when you reach adulthood, your brain was done developing and maturing. And it was kind of thought that your genes actually dictated how it would grow. And once it was done, it would remain in the same state. However, with today's multitude of genetic research and all the advancements in technology under our belts, we're aware that our brain is fully capable of changing throughout our lives. And the biological destiny is more malleable than we ever thought it would be. So how is diet influencing our mood, and how does it actually lead to our brain changing and growing and improve neuroplasticity in the brain? So Felice Jacka, the director of Food and Mood Center in Australia's Deakin University, who is also the researcher that was conducted SMILES, decided to take a look at the hippocampus in order to see if it might provide any clues with regards to neuroplasticity or brain growth. And so the hippocampus is often described as the brain's memory system, but it is also part of the human limbic system that in turn is affected by mood and anxiety disorders. So it does play a role in mood as well. Jacka says that neuroimaging showed that people who have depression tended to have a smaller hippocampus. However, when successfully treated, it tends to grow and flourish. Also, at the University of California, LA, in Pinilla's lab, led by Fernando Gomez, he showed evidence for neurogenesis. So the studies showed that manipulating the diet could actually change the levels of important proteins and promote brain growth. So when Gomez Pinilla's group fed rats foods that were high in nutrients and full of omega-3s, they saw that the hippocampus grew and it actually improved cognition and the mood in the rats. So given this data, Jacka decided to re-examine the relationship between the way people ate and their hippocampal size. So she and a group of researchers asked 255 people aged 60 to 64 to fill out a questionnaire about their dietary practices. They then took brain scans at the beginning of the study and then 10 years later. And this shows that it's a longitudinal study in order to see the long-term effects on food on your brain health. Results showed that individuals who ate healthier were more likely to have a larger hippocampus than those who partook in unhealthier eating habits and patterns, mainly similarly to Western diets. And so this shows that there is a relationship between dietary patterns and mental health as well. A bigger hippocampus is stronger and has a greater number of connecting cells that are able to reach out and communicate with neighboring cells in order to promote learning, memory, and increase and make your mood even better. So it's becoming more and more clear that diet is an area that we have to intervene in order to promote brain growth and function as well. So now I'd like to introduce BDNF. So I personally didn't know what BDNF was before doing some research, because we all know that when it comes to mood and anxiety, serotonin tends to get the spotlight and all the attention. And honestly, no one ever hears about BDNF. But new research is actually showing the role of another important brain chemical called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is an important brain-going protein. So BDNF has gained attraction because it acts as a fertilizing biomolecule that supports the growth of brain synapses and chemicals during the development of the brain. It also plays a key role in keeping them healthy and keeping the brains healthy and adaptable in adulthood. So BDNF also acts as a protective molecule that makes our brain more resilient when faced with threats and stress factors. And low BDNF levels actually lead to brain suffering. Studies have also shown that patients with depression and anxiety tend to have lower BDNF levels than those without a diagnosis. However, that's not the end of the world, because BDNF could be found in a variety of different foods, including nuts and leafy greens. And it's also included in omega-3s, dark chocolate, berries, olive oil, and even green tea. And researchers from Spain's University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria showed that patients who followed the Mediterranean diet had higher levels of BDNF than those who ate a low-fat foods. And for those who were experiencing depression at the time, it also showed a larger jump in BDNF and even a bigger drop in depressive symptoms. So not only would this help foster the connection in your brain, but it would also help protect your brain from pro-inflammatory molecules. And so talking about inflammation, I would like to touch upon that aspect with regards to food and how food can affect inflammation and in turn your mental health as well. So inflammation is an important immune response that is good in moderation, and it's good when it occurs in certain situations. And we usually hear about this term every day, but we usually hear about it with regards to our body. However, inflammation could also affect our brain, and our brain and the surroundings of our brain could also get inflamed too. So inflammation is a protective factor for the brain, and it does keep it in good shape as it allows it to evolve successfully. However, when there is an imbalance and large numbers of pro-inflammatory molecules invade the brain, it could actually endanger key cells. And this could lead to a loss of cells, which affects neural circuits and ultimately the human experience, in turn affecting your mood as well. So these alterations of the neural circuits and connections could occur in the regions of the brain that are related to arousal, fear, and emotion. And one of those areas is actually the hippocampus. And studies have shown that over a third of patients diagnosed with depression have high levels of different inflammatory molecules. And this is because inflammation actually tends to slow the connections in the brain and hindering the connections in the brain, which makes it harder for the messages to connect with each other. So this makes it harder and leads to symptoms of depression and anxiety as well. And Western diets are actually consistently associated with higher levels of inflammatory markers. And there have actually been many questions about whether or not this could be a side effect of depression or anxiety, or whether it's a cause. However, it was shown that the addition of anti-inflammatory agents could significantly improve patients' mood outcome. So although it's difficult to establish a strict cause and effect relationship in this situation, there is one offender that keeps popping up as a cause of inflammation, and it is a poor diet and how you fuel your body. And that's why consuming brain healthy foods would not only benefit your body, but it would benefit your brain in terms of forming connections, and it will protect your brain from pro-inflammatory molecules as well. And omega-3s have been found to improve inflammation in a variety of different studies. It actually reduces depressive symptoms and anxiety, and they reduce inflammation as well, which relieves stress from the brain, and it makes you feel better and puts you in a better mood as well. Large-scale epidemiological studies have also shown that low magnesium levels are not only linked to an increase in inflammatory markers, but also lead to higher levels of depression. So adding magnesium here and there into your diet could actually strengthen synaptic connections, lead to less inflammation, and by extension, ease your mood and decrease your anxiety. So what if I told you brain health doesn't only involve your brain, but it could involve other parts of your body? So a multitude of research studies have demonstrated that the human gut actually plays a role in regulating your mental health. So there's kind of a reason why we always talk about our gut reactions and gut feelings. When we're saddened, we usually say, oh, I'm so gutted. And when we're nervous or stressed before an exam or a date, we feel like our stomachs are getting entangled, we feel nauseous. But none of us have actually thought about the relationship between why stress causes our stomach or why nervousness causes our stomach to feel that way. And not until recently have we started to look into the relationship between the gut and the mind, which is a very important relationship that we should keep in mind, because there is a powerful signaling highway known as the gut-brain axis that plays an important role in the basic survival and also plays a role in your depression and anxiety and mood. And it also happens that one of the neurotransmitters that regulates learning, memory, and emotions, which is serotonin, is actually found in the gut and not the brain. So what is the gut microbiome? Humans carry a ton of bacteria in the intestinal tract, making the human body kind of a walking bioreactor. And the majority of these microorganisms actually live in the small intestine. the large intestine. And the large intestine is actually the site of active fermentation of non-digestible dietary components. And the interaction between the microflora in the gut and the dietary substances we consume has been a topic of interest lately. So this gastrointestinal microflora represents an ecosystem of the highest complexity, and we still need to learn a lot more about it as we go along. And we could define it as an open ecosystem comprising of a group of microbial populations that coexist in an equilibrium in a spontaneously defined region. So these gut microbiota and this gut bacteria actually tends to degrade and ferment dietary fiber, and in turn produces metabolites that mediate a number of vital consequences through further metabolism in the liver. And the flora actually has an essential role in several bioconversions and further absorption of metabolites in the body. So why is the gut microbiome important for our entire body and our brain? So microbial reactions in the gut have an important role not only in gut health, but also in general human health and mental health. There is growing evidence to support that the idea that a healthy gut microbiome could protect against gastrointestinal diseases, inflammatory bowel diseases, as well as cancer or some types of cancer. And we've been hearing a lot about probiotics and how they help our body and help our gut and decrease inflammation. So probiotics are actually a living microbial food supplement that can benefit the health of those who consume it. Probiotics maintain and improve the intestinal microbial balance, and the use of them actually stimulates the growth of preferred microorganisms and distances potentially harmful ones, as it reinforces the natural defense system in the body. And the microbiome, however, also plays an essential role in the gut because it actually sends messages from the gut to the brain and affects your mental health as well. So in 2004, researchers from Japan's Kyushu University took a closer look at the brains of germ-free mice so they could see how they respond to stress. So basically, germ-free mice are mice that haven't been subjected to a lot of bacteria or germs, and so they have a less developed microbiota. And upon observing the animals, scientists saw that germ-free mice were more stressed when placed in a tight-fit tube for an hour in comparison to the control group. And their cortisol levels actually were much higher than those of the control group as well. This experiment was later repeated after the mice were given probiotics. So the researchers reconstituted the guts of the germ-free mice with Bifidobacterium infantis, which is a type of probiotic and which helps with digestion and vitamin synthesis. And doing so actually reversed the stress response that they exhibited previously, and they were able to respond to this situation normally. And this doesn't only apply to mice and animals, but it also applies to us as humans. So depressed and anxious humans have also shown to have a lower diversity of gut bacteria. And although it's unclear whether or not it's depression and anxiety that lead to a lower amount of healthy gut bacteria, or whether it's the other way around, it may be a bit of both. But it's still important to keep in mind that we shouldn't ignore this connection because it could actually make a change. And a study conducted by Paul Enck at the University of Tübingen showed that participants who took Bifidobacterium longum, which is another type of probiotic, showed less stress responses in certain conditions in comparison to the placebo group. They also showed changes in brain activity, and it also showed improvement in their depressive and stress symptoms. So finally, I know I threw a lot of information at you guys, and I know it's very information heavy. So I kind of wanted to summarize everything I said, or the important things I said, in one slide. So I did talk about the Mediterranean lifestyle for most of this presentation, because I believe it's a very important lifestyle to follow. So for example, you could integrate more olive oil, more chickpeas through hummus, more rice, more salmon, and then yogurt. You could also increase your probiotic foods such as yogurt, kombucha, sauerkraut, pickles, and even kimchi. And what I want to stress again is that I'm not saying that you should change your entire diet and only eat these, because like I said in the beginning, labeling food as good or bad creates a negative relationship with them. And honestly, we're here to enjoy food and not pinpoint every single thing we should eat and every single thing we shouldn't eat, because eating food is honestly an enjoyable experience, and it's also sometimes a social event. So I'm not saying we should entirely change our diet. I'm just saying we should integrate more of these foods into our diet in order to improve our mental health and our overall health as well. So thank you for attending. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer them.
Thank you so much, AlAnoud. We do have a couple of questions. I'll go ahead and ask you. How much nutrient loss occurs when you cook food? Like if you saute the greens, roast the broccoli, stuff like that.
So I would say it also depends on what is being cooked, because for example, some foods you can gain more nutrients from them by cooking them. So for example, carrots have fat soluble vitamins. And if you cook them in oil, you better absorb the vitamins that they have. So it honestly depends on the nutrient you are eating. I cannot tell you each and every food and how it gets affected by cooking, but it depends on what you're making. Sometimes overcooking food, however, could release more of the nutrients than you want it to. So for example, for water soluble vitamins, if you boil them in water for too long or cook them in water for too long, it could actually leach out the vitamins and you wouldn't get as much vitamins as you want to.
That makes sense. And then we usually throw that water away. Yeah. So then using that water to make soup or something. We have another question. Isabella says, hi, AlAnoud, great presentation. I was wondering if you drew on personal experience to explain the information you outlined in your presentation.
So actually, yes, I did draw from some personal experience. So 2 years ago, and actually at the start of COVID, I got this like weird stomach pain in my stomach that I thought was, oh, maybe I don't know, maybe it's a bug, maybe it's something. And however, it persisted for a couple of weeks. And so I decided to go get it checked. I did a bunch of different testings. I did an MRI scan. I think I also did an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, and all of the results showed that, oh, your stomach is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong. However, I repeated one of the tests and the doctor finally came up to me and he's like, your stomach lining is slightly irritated, but it's not a cause of concern. However, he's like, I think it's due to all the stress you're experiencing that could actually lead to these stomach pains. And so from then I kind of decided that, okay, so basically brain gut connection kind of, and that I wanted to kind of change the foods I ate so I could maybe feel better. So I tried to integrate more foods that help me feel better and move away from ones that didn't. And it differs on a case-to-case basis. So this is just for me. But for example, caffeine would irritate my stomach. So I switched to matcha because I still needed the caffeine, but coffee was too acidic for me. And that actually helped. I also started to eat more greens and maybe fiber so it could get my stomach moving a bit more and it could increase the digestion a bit more. And so that's why it's one reason I'm very interested in this subject, because I feel like nutrition in relation to mental health is kind of overlooked a lot of the time. And we only focus about nutrition from the realm of, oh, how do I look? How does this make me, like, my body look, whatever. And I feel that's a very negative way to think of food, because food, one, nourishes our body for fuel. It also gives us energy, and it also helps our mental health as well. Oh, Linda, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, sorry. We have another question. You talked a lot about vitamins and nutrients with the role they play in improving our brain health and mitigating depression and mood regulation. Does this play into at all the mood boost that people say they get when eating something like dark chocolate?
So dark chocolate is actually one of the foods that does boost your mood and that does make you feel better. And it's actually good even long term. But for example, for foods that are like, because a lot of people are like, oh, chocolate puts me in a good mood because it increases serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, which is very true. However, that mood boost is more short term. However, the other foods and the nutrients that I discussed here, including dark chocolate, actually provide a long-term difference in your emotions. And it isn't just like, oh, I feel good and happy for a day and it's gone. It actually sustains for a longer period of time.
Interesting. And one more question, AlAnoud. Again, you talk about a lot of these nutrients. selenium and folate and vitamin A and C and so on. Should I be taking a supplement?
I personally feel that it should be mostly from nutrition and like foods, like directly from foods. If you're highly deficient in them, you might need supplements in order to give your body enough of them, but you can fully get enough of these nutrients through foods. And I know sometimes it's hard to integrate all these foods in your meals, but like you saw maybe in the presentation, a lot of the nutrients are found in foods that overlap. So leafy greens nearly have most of the nutrients I talked about. Meats, for those who can eat or like are non-vegetarian or vegans, meat is also a great option, and especially fish and salmon. There's also nuts and legumes are like very high in different micronutrients and also in protein as well. So it benefits your body in several ways. So I feel if you can integrate several of these and maybe look up recipes and try new things, it's actually an enjoyable experience, not only cooking, but it also benefits you mentally. But like I said, maybe supplementation will be needed if you're very deficient in these micronutrients.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for that information. And I think we have one more question we have time for. Great presentation. Great presentation. I learned a lot. I was wondering what your opinion on mindful eating is.
So I actually love the idea of mindful eating. It's something I like look into a lot because I feel it presents a good way of thinking about food. And I'm kind of passionate about that subject because for me, mindful eating is eating and listening to your body's cues, which I feel many of us kind of ignore a lot of the time. And if you actually listen to your body's cues of when it's hungry or when it's full, you're actually going to eat the right amount of food when you're actually eating the meal. You'll actually get to enjoy the meal itself and not kind of like just eat it real quick and just basically fuel your body without actually enjoying the experience of eating. It actually also diminishes the bad relationships you have with food because that way you're actually listening to your body, you're eating the foods you want to eat at the times you want to eat them, and it decreases the amounts of cravings you have later on. Because if you're like, I feel like having chocolate now, and you actually give yourself chocolate and don't deprive yourself of that like chocolate, you're not going to crave it a lot later on. And because later on it could turn into something worse where you just like start eating chocolate here and there. And basically, I think listening to your body's cues, and I think mindful eating is something that everyone should follow because it's not a diet that restricts you from eating certain things, which I am against most of the time. It is a lifestyle basically, which you have to integrate in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, AlAnoud. We are at time, so we're going to go ahead and stop. Boy, but it sure sounds like there's a lot of research that backs up that brain-gut connection, and a lot of research that makes me want to make sure that I get those nutrients. So being careful and mindful about making sure I get all those foods. We appreciate your time, AlAnoud. And thank you all for coming. Again, we will be sending out a recording of this, so you can watch for that in the next couple of days. AlAnoud and I will be sticking around if you have any questions for the next couple of minutes as well. But again, thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.